6 million Jewish people were killed in the Holocaust. 2.7 million were Polish.
As a Pole, I just wanted to say that I really appreciate this video and this man for pointing out that the Jews who lived in Poland were also, Polish citizens. Poland was the biggest place for Jews in Europe to live at that time. So when we lost like 3 million Jews, they were also, Polish citizens. So Poland lost not only the Polish people who died in the war, but also 3 million of their own people. Hello everyone.
Hello everyone.
This is Waldemar.
And this is Weronika. And
Beautiful.
together we are
WWII Reactions. Alright, so today is a video that was recommended to us a lot. I mean a lot for our channels, which is like 3 times.
That is a lot.
So it is a lot for us, yes. So we are doing the reaction now. And this video it's kind of complicated, I think, because, well, Weronika hasn't seen it at all, right?
No.
I've seen like part of it. I've never watched it full. And the reason for that is that I know some of this stuff. I think most of this stuff. So, yeah, like I said, I'm maybe not a big...
You know the numbers or?
Yeah. I'm not a big expert of the World War II, but I'm kind of interested in the subject. So, like, it wasn't weird or shocking to me to see those numbers. But I never seen it fully. So I don't know if by the end he talks about something more, because I don't think you can make an 80-minute video just showing the numbers of the fallen people. So, yeah, this is kind of my first time watching, but not really, but mostly it's Weronika first time.
Yeah.
But about the numbers, I think it's most of it too.
Yeah.
So, let's just start the video.
The average lifespan of an American is 80 years. And an 80-year-old today was 10 when World War II ended, 4 when it began. A soldier who saw battle would have to be in his late 80s at least today. Generals, political leaders, the decision makers of the war, few are still with us. And over the past few decades, we've seen authors and filmmakers rush to capture stories from survivors before this connection of memory is lost.
I already like how the data is presented.
This project is not about individual war stories, and it's not about survivors. We're going to tally up the tens of millions of people whose lives were cut short by the war, and see how these numbers stack up to other wars in history, including trends in recent conflicts. We'll be counting soldiers and civilians separately. Each of these figures represents 1,000 people who died. Civilians...
So you can see the scale of the conflict if you just put one figure, one symbol for 1,000 people. Right?
Were of all walks of life. Whereas military deaths were almost entirely men. The average age was about 23. In most battles, for every 1,000 soldiers killed, there are more than 1,000 who were injured. The word casualty can be confusing because in military speak, it often includes both deaths and injuries, and anything else that takes a soldier out of service. Here, we're just counting the deaths, and we'll begin with American soldiers.
But it's so well done with the sound effects and the music and
Over
whatever.
400,000 died.
Oh.
Most of the deaths occurred in the European theater, fighting the Nazis. And about a quarter were in the Pacific, fighting the...
And they only started in 44?
Yeah.
A quarter were in the Pacific, fighting the Japanese. When you put them on the timeline, you see that casualties were the heaviest at the end of the war. The war began on September 1st, 1939. But the US wasn't willing to join the fight until Pearl Harbor, 2 years in. The deaths increased drastically on D-Day, when the Allies invaded Normandy. One of the most tragic moments of the war was...
I'm sorry for pausing, but I wonder what are those deaths in 43?
The first ones? I don't know.
Because 42 was Pearl Harbor. 44 they started.
Maybe the first troops they sent out?
No, the first one was Normandy. Okay. The D-Day landings.
Okay, there was no like intermediate support between those?
Maybe in Africa. I'm not sure. No, I'm making a fool of myself, I think.
Oh, you're not?
Well, maybe in Africa? Or in Italy?
One of the most tragic moments of the war was on D-Day at Omaha Beach, where 2,500 Americans fell. So about the same number of US soldiers died on this single beach landing as the entire 13 years of the recent war in Afghanistan. The bloodiest battle in the Pacific was Okinawa, which lasted 82 days, during which 12,500 Americans died. About 5,000 of these deaths were at sea from kamikaze attacks. Now let's look at some other countries, starting with Europe. Germany started World War II when it invaded Poland. Poland ultimately lost 200,000 soldiers in the war. Most died after the invasion while the country was occupied by Germany and the Soviet Union. Germany, meanwhile, lost just 16,000 in the invasion of Poland. The Nazis went on to invade and conquer other countries, including Denmark, Belgium, the Netherlands, France, Greece, and Yugoslavia. France surrendered, but after losing 92,000 soldiers in the Battle of France. Over 200,000 ultimately fell, which includes deaths in POW camps, French colonies, and other fighting. Yugoslavia suffered almost 500,000 military deaths. The initial invasion brought relatively few casualties on both sides, but the deaths mounted under Nazi occupation due to guerrilla fighting, civil conflict, and mass executions. The Nazi invasions were swift, with relatively few German losses. Even the Nazi commanders expressed surprise at their success. And then we have the United Kingdom and the United States, who were not invaded but took the fight to the Nazis. Britain lost about the same number of soldiers as the US, which includes the British colonies. Germany lost about 500,000 soldiers fighting the US and Britain in what is known as the Western Front, which took place in France and Belgium.
What about Italy
Most Nazi
and
soldiers
Africa?
died in the Eastern Front.
It's starting with Europe, so not Africa so far. I don't.
The numbers are staggering. The most famous battle of the Eastern Front, and perhaps the turning point of the European war, was Stalingrad. The German 6th Army successfully took Stalingrad, but then got surrounded by the Soviets and cut off from food and ammunition. 500,000 Nazis would ultimately die in Stalingrad. Another 100,000 were taken prisoner, of which 6,000 would ever return. POWs had a low survival rate throughout World War II, and it was particularly grim in the East. When you include these POWs, roughly the same number of Germans died in Stalingrad as all the Western Front fighting against France, the UK, and the US.
You were looking for that up?
Yeah, I was looking that we are all one color now.
Yeah, sorry. Pull it.
And though Stalingrad was a victory for the Soviets, they suffered almost twice as many losses as Germany. The Soviet Union would eventually defeat the once unstoppable German army, killing 2.3 million Nazi soldiers. But winning the war came at a cost.
Will it end?
It's just...
That makes an
Sorry,
impression,
things.
doesn't it?
Sorry?
That makes an impression.
Well, they didn't care how many people they would lose, and here's the results. Phew.
8.7 million is the official tally by the Russian military, a hotly disputed number. Some studies have calculated as many as 14 million dead. To complete the count of European military deaths, we need to add German deaths from other fronts, including the North and Africa, as well as deaths from other Axis powers allied with the Nazis, Hungary, Romania, and Italy. When you put these European military deaths on the timeline, it looks like this. You can now interact with the chart to learn more. Pause the narration if you would like more time.
So much work into that.
And now we switch to civilian deaths in Europe. Six million Jewish people were killed in the Holocaust. If you separate this by country, you see that about half, 2.7 million, were Polish. 700,000 were Soviets, followed by Hungary and 17 other countries.
As a Pole, I just wanted to say that I really appreciate this video and this man for pointing out that the Jews who lived in Poland were also, Polish citizens. So it's because when you have some summaries of the World War II, you'll see that there is 6 million Jews who died, and there is this and this many Poles who died. But yeah, the Poland was the biggest place for Jews in Europe to live at that time. So when we lost like 3 million Jews, they were also, Polish citizens. So Poland lost not only the Polish people who died in the war, but also 3 million of their own people. They were Polish citizens too. Yeah.
A lot of them felt Polish as well.
Yeah, they speak Polish. Yeah. They felt Polish. They
were Polish, effectively. Not even felt is not a good word. They can be Jewish and Polish.
Yeah, the being Jewish was their religion, but at that point there were no Jewish country. So yeah, but it's good to see that he really did some good research here, and he pointed it out that it looks like that.
Followed by Hungary and 17 other countries. Broken down another way, about half of the 6 million were killed in the concentration camps. Over 1 million died in Auschwitz. Most were killed in the gas chambers. Others died from starvation, exhaustion, disease, and other forms of execution. The second most deadly camp was Treblinka, which was exclusively an extermination camp, set up to look like a train station.
Hey.
Mobile killing groups killed 1.4 million Jews. Like with the gas chambers, men were killed first to reduce the risk of revolt. The Holocaust also includes non-Jewish deaths. Between 130,000 to 500,000 Roma, then called Gypsies, were killed. The numbers are disputed. About 250,000 people with disabilities were killed. Homosexuals, Catholics, and other groups were also exterminated, but their numbers were relatively small. Some historians say that other civilian deaths should go under the label of Holocaust. About 2 million non-Jewish Poles were killed under German occupation, some of which were sent to the gas chambers at Auschwitz. When you combine civilian and military deaths, over 16% of the total Polish population died in World War II, which is the highest percentage of any country. But not the highest in total death count. The Soviet Union again tops that list, losing at least as many civilians as it did soldiers, somewhere between 10 and 20 million. A particularly dark moment for the Soviet Union was the siege of Leningrad, now St. Petersburg. German forces surrounded Leningrad before civilians could be evacuated. Supplies, including food, were cut off for 2.5 years.
What a horrible life too.
How would you live for 2.5 years without supplies?
Right, you couldn't, you didn't.
Mostly from starvation, mostly civilians. Stalin's cruelty towards his own people is partly responsible for these numbers.
That's one thing.
He often didn't allow civilians to evacuate from cities, thinking it would cause the soldiers protecting them to fight harder. About 1 million Soviets died in Stalin's own labor camps, called the Gulag. Just about every country suffered civilian losses, especially countries who were invaded. While many died as a result of so-called collateral damage, the biggest numbers occurred when it was no accident. Civilians were exterminated, purposely fired upon or bombed, used as human shields, or intentionally deprived of food. The intentional killing of civilians was done by most warring parties, including the United Kingdom and the United States. The United Kingdom was spared of a land invasion, but still lost 60,000 civilians, largely from German air raids or blitzes, often directed at civilian population centers. The UK did the same to German cities at a much greater magnitude, causing about 10 times the number of deaths. But most German civilian deaths came from the ground at the late stage of the war. When the Nazi regime collapsed, civilians living in occupied regions had to desperately flee from the advancing Soviet army. Rapes were widespread, and death estimates ranged from 600,000 to 3 million. Let's step back and see where we are with the totals. We just counted about 20 million civilian deaths in Europe. If you add this to the European military deaths we already covered, it brings
That's
us to
more
over
than
4
Polish
million.
population at the moment.
Then we have the Asian theater. Here we see the vast majority of military deaths in Asia came from China and Japan. On the civilian side, about 6 million deaths from China, Indonesia, Korea, Indochina, and the Philippines can be attributed to Japanese war crimes, which are sometimes compared to the Nazi atrocities due to the sheer scale of the cruelty. China had the second highest death count after the Soviet Union. And like the Soviets, the Chinese government demonstrated a stunning willingness to sacrifice its own people. Chinese nationalists opened the dike at the Yellow River, hoping the flood would halt the Japanese advance. 500,000 Chinese civilians or more were killed, which is
Not a great
3
move.
times the number who died in all countries in the 2004 Asian tsunamis. But the invasion of China only cost Japan 200,000 soldiers. Most were killed fighting the US and allies in the Pacific War. A significant portion of Japanese civilian deaths were caused by American firebombing and the 2 nuclear attacks. Contrary to official US statements, these airstrikes were directed at civilian populations, not military targets.
I mean, you can see watching them, this how industrial were the death camps
Yeah.
settled by the Germans. That 2 atomic bombs didn't kill. I mean, even not.
And the fraction
You can
population, yes.
even compare it.
But so much thought went into making them as efficient as possible, as horrible as the word is to you, but it was very efficient.
Yeah, but
In and out.
it's amazing. You could drop nuclear bombs over and over, and you wouldn't reach as high number as the Germany did with the concentration camps. With all the transport system and
like this thing set up
methods
to
of
look like a
killings.
train station. It comes in, comes out. It's horrifying. Well, all of this is horrifying, and also how they showed, it wasn't only. I think it's good that they showed this as well. It wasn't only the Nazis doing this, but in retaliation, things were done to them as well and to the civilians. And like these bombings, it's not like it's just the Nazis who killed people.
With the bombings, I heard that there was this guy. I think he was a British man, and he was. I don't know if he was in charge of the RAF. The RAF is the it's the planes, the aircrafts of the British Army. And he had the plan to force Germany to surrender by bombing their cities. So that was his method to victory. And he promised that to Churchill, that he can make Germany surrender by bombing the cities and killing the civilians. Like you have the bombing of Dresden.
But with the nuclear war?
No, with just regular bombings.
Okay.
Actually, the nuclear strikes weren't the biggest casualties when it comes to bombs, because the biggest, I think, is the Tokyo bombing. I think it was called carpet bombing.
I haven't heard of that story.
They created this sort of fire in Tokyo, which can only happen in certain situations when you need to reach proper weather and the proper temperature and the proper amount of firepower. That it created this like tornado of fire, and it killed more people than the fire pump. Yeah. So. Yeah, but there was this guy in the British Army who had this plan of forcing Germany to surrender by just dropping bombs on civilians.
And who stopped it? Or that's what they did?
No, they didn't. I mean, they did some civilian bombing, but they didn't approve this plan. And after the war, I think he was like kind of stepped over. They didn't even thank him then when there was this like a parade or something. And Churchill was thanking like everyone who contributed to winning the war, and he was put aside. He didn't mention him because he was like quite a controversial figure.
Yeah.
Their attacks. Contrary to official U.S. statements, these airstrikes were directed at civilian populations, not military targets. When you add all the deaths outside of Europe, it brings us to a grand total of 70 million for the war. Give or take, depending on who's counting, and what civilian deaths get included. More people died in World War II than in any other war in history. For comparison, here are 20 or so of the very worst wars and atrocities we have on record. Some of these are more of atrocities than wars, but we've seen how that distinction can get blurry. Some of these spanned across centuries. World War II had the highest body count, and it all happened in just 6 years. The world's population has grown significantly since the earliest atrocities on this list. If we want to compare them in terms of what percentage of the world died, we can adjust the chart to look like this. This rough approximation tells us there may have been more devastating wars before World War II, proportionally speaking.
What's the really high one? I don't remember the second one on the list.
And Russian, I don't know what it is. And Russian,
I don't know what it is either. Maybe we could find out at some point.
Mongol conquest, I know.
Yeah, but I don't know this one.
In terms of what percentage of the world died, we can adjust the chart to look like this. This rough approximation tells us there may have been more devastating wars before World War II, proportionally speaking. When we turn to post-war conflicts, it's hard to say anything that isn't controversial. But the data shows something quite extraordinary has been happening. In 1989, John Gaddis coined the phrase the long peace to identify the absence of conflict between the nuclear powers during the Cold War. 25 years later, the Cold War is over, and the term is still being used, although its meaning may have shifted. European countries have not fought each other, except for this 10-day war in 1956 when the Soviet Union invaded Hungary. When we look at European wars before World War II, it looks like this. They tend to be more frequent as you go back, though smaller in scale. And the largest 44 economies of the world.
But you had in the 90s war in Yugoslavia, so I don't know what he means by telling that non-European countries were fighting with each other. And now we have, of course, the
that was
war in
before,
Ukraine.
right?
No, but he says that in this period there was
Yeah, but this video was filmed before the war in Ukraine.
Yeah. So I said it. I just added it.
Oh yeah.
But in the 90s was the war in Yugoslavia, so
have not battled each other since World War II. Rich countries have fought poorer countries, like the US versus Iraq. But rich countries have not fought other rich countries. Such a period of peace between the so-called great powers.
Maybe that's what he means.
The Roman Empire.
And it's a bit,
To many, peace is too strong of a word. Wars have occurred since World War II, and they can be grouped into these 4 categories. We don't see colonial wars anymore. We've already noted that interstate wars between rich countries have not occurred at all. And here we see wars involving smaller economies have tapered off. That leaves civil wars of 2 types, with and without foreign intervention. And this is what these battle deaths look like alongside of World War II. More people died fighting in World War II than in all the wars since. And again, we can't forget about world population, which has almost tripled since World War II. If we scale these numbers to show deaths in proportion to world population, showing the likelihood that a person on Earth dies in battle, the downward trend becomes even more pronounced. Now, this isn't to infer anything about why this trend is occurring. That's a discussion for another day. You can now interact with this chart to explore what conflicts are behind the totals. Now, bear in mind, we're just looking at battle deaths here, not civilian deaths, but those too are in decline. Peace is a difficult thing to measure. It's a bit like counting the people who didn't die in wars that never happened. We give such importance to the word peace, but we don't tend to notice it when it occurs or report on it. Sometimes it takes reminding ourselves of how terrible war once was to see the peace that has been growing around us. Of course, this trend may not continue, and it's not clear how looking at these charts can help us make the right decisions to ensure that it does. But the longer the long peace grows, the more significant it becomes. So if watching the news doesn't make us feel hopeful about where things are heading, watching the numbers might.
Yeah, but I think the war in Ukraine kind
you could
of
say.
waked us up.
Well, in the East as well. Like, yeah. Yeah.
I think that's it. Well, that is one hell of a video. And I think, I watched it, like I said, but I think I never finished it. But now I'm not sure how much I watched it when I watched it. So.
Yeah, it really made an impression. It was amazing. It was really hard towards the end, to be honest, right? To be quite sad, because...
Yeah. When he made this video, it was kind of a different situation in the world, and now you have a country which has nuclear weapons in a country which, well, doesn't, but
and it's,
a lot of things can happen right now.
Yeah, and that's only thinking about Europe and not,
Yeah, and we in Europe, we were kind of spoiled by this peace after the Second World War, and many people had this, and myself included, people were thinking that
this would never happen again.
Yeah, not in our lifetime.
Not in Europe. Yeah, we knew, like, well, fine, there are wars happening somewhere else, but those countries, it's so far away.
Yeah.
But in Europe, remember. Though, when I speak with people who are from Ukraine, I usually hear that in their minds the war has started a long time ago, like since Maidan, and it's been...
Yeah. But
yeah, we were kind of turning a blind eye, and we were like, oh, this is just a little bit of a conflict, it's going to blow.
Yeah, because it wasn't the same kind of conflict that it is now. Yeah. Now we have since 2022, we had a full-scale invasion. I hope this video will not get copyrighted because we couldn't pause it too much. It was difficult, to find a moment to pause, and also this video is so
packed with information.
Yeah.
Sorry, I cut you in.
Yeah, but that's what I wanted to say. You can't really pause to add anything because there is nothing to add. The numbers speaks for itself.
Yeah, it was very simple.
For themselves.
The music and the effects, but it makes an impression. I think it's supposed to.
Yeah, but what impresses me too is that the fact that it's apparently an interactive map. So if you want to learn more about it, I think we'll do that.
We'll do that. We'll check it out.
All right. So thank you guys for watching with us. Yeah, it wasn't a comedic video, but it was definitely worth watching.
Yeah, thank you for recommending it.
We enjoy watching content like this because, when you watch something like that, you feel a bit smarter and you feel more productive. So if you have more content like that to recommend to us, then we would really like you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry for the lamps too. You will see that the lamps kind of died to us during the recording.
See you in the next video. Bye-bye.
Bye.